Well, good evening, everyone, and or good morning if you're in Singapore. About 5 minutes ago, I thought I was going to be talking to myself, and then Jim Stokes signed on, and then Don and Doug and Linda, Marcia, Russ, Susan, Dwanja, and people are coming in fairly fast and furious here just at the 7 o'clock mark. So we're going to go ahead and get into our program tonight. Just a quick review of what we talked about last week. We talked about changing your mind, and I gave you some NLP techniques for doing that. Also NLP techniques for neutralizing bad memories, and perhaps most importantly, the circle of excellence. And I was teaching a stimulating creativity class in Raleigh this week, and we introduced the circle of excellence to 10 people in that class, a small group, and at the end of the class, this is one of the things that they thought was going to be most useful to them. So I hope that all of you are finding it useful or will find it useful as well. Tonight, we're going to talk a little bit more about how you get to Successville, if you want to call it that, and I'm going to talk some more about belief systems and a couple of things for really making sure you achieve your goals, one of which is how you stay motivated and how you respond to setbacks. There are really two components to success. One of them is knowing the principles that will help you become successful. And then the other one is, what are the pitfalls? What are the roadblocks that keep you from getting there? And how do you neutralize those? We started off with essentially the 5 most important principles of success, and what I have found in the 40 or so years that I've been looking at this this stuff and trying to work some of the principles myself and working with people who were trying to do them, the big problems that people have in being successful tend to be psychological. They lose their incentive or their motivation, they procrastinate, they lose faith in the principles, or they have limiting beliefs, as we've said previously, that keep them from making things work. And there are a couple more issues that I think are really important, and we're going to talk about those tonight and give you some suggestions for dealing with them so that they don't block you. And then next week we're going to return to some of the basic, or not basic, but extended success principles would be a better word perhaps. So tonight we're going to revisit this whole thing about beliefs, limiting beliefs and other kinds of beliefs that can keep you from making the success principles work. And just to go back to our initial premise, if you always do what you've always done, you'll always get what you always got. But there's something very related to it, which is, as we've said, beliefs. And the statement could be, if you always believe what you've always believed, but I stated it a little differently here. If you always believe the same thing that you've always believed, then you'll always do what you've always done. And if you always do what you've always done, you'll always get what you always got. So it creates a vicious circle. And so if you're going to break out of that vicious circle, you have to do something about your beliefs. Okay. Now, there are a number of types of beliefs. The NLP people talk about models of reality. In science, they talk about paradigms. And as some of you probably know, changing paradigms is an extremely difficult thing to do. Science is replete with examples of this. As a matter of fact, I saw just a minute ago when I was looking at some of the Yahoo News, you know, they're still trying to confirm that Einstein's relativity theories are valid. And they just did another experiment with a couple of astronomical stars or planets or something that says, yep, it held up again. And so the old guy was apparently right. But how many years is that? Since about 1909 or so, when he first published his relativity theory. So old paradigms don't die very quickly, that's for sure. And so as you can see, this woman, she's contemplating someone she knows and thinking, golly, she's really a mean person. So there's beliefs about other people, there's beliefs about the world. But then there are three categories of beliefs that all of us have that can affect our ability to be successful. And the first one is beliefs about cause. And so something happens, and we, in attribution theory and psychology, we talk about attributing reasons for things happening or trying to figure out why things happen so that the world is hopefully a little bit more predictable to us. And so beliefs about cause. I didn't get a raise because my boss doesn't like me. May not have anything to do with the boss not liking you. It may be that HR put the kibosh on raises that year or didn't allocate enough money to go around, and so you didn't get one for that reason. You might have performed very well, or your boss might like you quite I can't even say that tonight, quite a lot. But we try to attribute reasons for things happening, and that's one of those. And then we have beliefs about meaning. If I make a mistake, it means I'm a bad person. Well, you know, the school system does tend to cause us to think that way, and then we go into the workplace and we're told similar things, and we see it in sports. If somebody makes an error, oh my goodness, that's terrible. And so one of the things that we have to get out of is that belief that making mistakes is bad, because if we hang on to that, then we'll never do anything creative or innovative because we won't take a chance that we'll do something that's going to be bad. And then we have beliefs about our identity. And one of those might be, I'm not the kind of person who hurts other people. I'm a nice person. But we also may have the belief that as we've said before, that we're not entitled to a lot of money because we're not well educated enough or whatnot. I have a friend who told me that somebody wanted to hire him to do consulting work, and he has no degree, and he lives in England, and in England, if you don't have a degree, that's a big stigma in their society. And yet these people wanted to hire him as a consultant, and I said, you say you're not qualified because you don't have a degree. Right. And I reminded him that Bill Gates and Michael Dell and Steve Jobs didn't have degrees, and they were quite successful. So, but you know, once you have those kinds of beliefs, it's very hard to shake them, and they function in your life to be impediments to your moving forward or taking opportunities that you might otherwise take. In fact, he was almost ready not to take this consulting job because he felt unqualified. And I pointed out to him they weren't paying him because he was a nice guy. They were paying him for his competence, and he's a very skilled guy. So fortunately, he took my advice and stayed with it. So these beliefs are there. Now, there are some other kinds of beliefs about identity that can affect your success. And here's an example. A man was trying to lose weight, and he, like many people, had been through all the weight loss programs and gone through all the yo-yo stuff, you know, lose weight, gain it back, lose weight, gain it back. And so he was working with an NLP practitioner who asked, can you imagine what things will be like if you become thin again? I didn't word it very well on the slide, but can you imagine what things will be like if you become thin again? And the man replied, yes, I'll look like I did when I didn't like myself. Now, what that says is if he loses weight, he won't like himself again. I mean, that's the implication. So can you understand why he would be unable to lose weight? Some mechanism that is self-protective is going to kick in and keep him heavy, because if he's thin, he won't like himself. And you'll find that there are other kinds of things like that. I've mentioned to you that you may have family and toxic friends who, if you start being too successful, they feel like you're getting above your station, is one of the ways they word it in England. And here in the South, we'd say getting above your raising. And so a lot of people, rather than face that kind of criticism or ostracism, will just give up and go back to where they were. So all of these tend to be unconscious beliefs. Most people don't know that these beliefs exist. And if some kind of change would threaten our sense of who we are, then that change is not likely to happen. And I put a reference on this slide to a book on beliefs by Robert Dilts. Robert Dilts is one of the early practitioners of NLP. He's worked a long time directly with John Grinder and Richard Bandler, who were the two primary co-founders of NLP. And Tim Halbom and Susie Smith were co-authors on this particular book. And this book is very good in showing you how changing beliefs can be difficult to do, and also how if you're not congruent with what you say, you're not going to get there. Now, for example, if this fellow had said in response, can you imagine what things will be like if you're thin again? If he'd said yes, and they say, how does that look good to you? And he said yes, but you notice that his head is slightly shaking a no, then what he's saying is consciously and verbally he's saying yes, but his nonverbal response is no. And there's a basic given in psychology that if the nonverbal response contradicts the verbal, you always go with the nonverbal, because the nonverbal response is coming from deep within yourself, and your subconscious is telling you that, no, I'm not ready for that. And so there are congruity tests that they tell about in the book that you may have to get somebody to help you with, and I'll come back to those in just a moment. Now, one of the ways to identify these beliefs is to listen carefully to what people say. And the word because often signals the following to be a belief. I'm fat because of my gene pool. I'm fat because my parents were both fat. So what you're saying is, I can't help myself because it's genetic, and if they were fat, I'm doomed to be fat, and there's no point in trying. I have a bad temper because I'm Irish or Southern, or grew up in a family that was not very fortunate. I can't seem to get ahead because, I can't lose weight because, I'm a failure because. And here's one, I'd like to, but something keeps it from happening. So that something that keeps it from happening is a belief about the world that keeps a person from being successful. I can't do that because I can't see me being successful. Remember, we said that if you can't see yourself doing something, then there's very little likelihood that you ever will, which is one of the reasons for using visualization on a repetitive basis so that you can develop an image of yourself being successful. And then here's one about patterns. I always lose in the end. In other words, a person's been beaten down so many times that they've developed the belief that they're never going to get out of that rut, that they're always going to get knocked down in the end. What can you expect? I had a terrible childhood. It's amazing how many of us blame our childhood for all the problems we have. And of course, we might be blaming parents in it, or we might just say we were sickly as children or had all kinds of problems or whatnot. They won't let me. Notice that they is a very unspecified word, and so if you're an NLP practitioner, you challenge those kinds of things and ask who specifically won't let you, and how is it that they don't let you, and what keeps you from doing it, and so on. So there are techniques for breaking through these. Sometimes people blame the company they work in or the organization. They believe the company hates women, Hispanics, blacks, Jews, white people, name any group you like, but they believe that they are victims of prejudice, and therefore that keeps them down. Or I've seen people in organizations who would like to get promoted and so on, and they think that management will never buy their ideas or their movement and so on. So there's all kinds of ways of uncovering these hidden beliefs. And until you know what they are, it's almost impossible to do anything about them. I'm going to talk about this slide in just a moment, but I want to tell you one anecdote so I don't forget to do it. Robert Dilts tells about working with a woman who was a, beg your pardon, my computer's giving me messages about being overloaded. Robert Dilts tells about working with a woman who was an allergist. That is, she was a physician who specialized in treating allergies, and she herself suffered from allergies. And so one of the things that we have learned is that beliefs play a very important part in illnesses, and particularly things like allergies, and that sometimes you can alleviate or at least reduce the effect of these things through changing the beliefs about them. And so Dilts was working with her to reduce this belief in the effect of pollen and that sort of thing on her, and got her to a point where she had almost accepted that this was the case, and he could tell by testing her that she was ready to accept this. And she suddenly realized that if she were able to get over allergies that easily, that her profession was almost unnecessary. And so she gave up the correction, if you want to call it that, rather than have to question everything she did to help other people and make a living doing it. And so anytime your identity is threatened in some way, you'll find that your psyche will block your progress, because otherwise it would be a bad thing for you. Now, this slide talks about something interesting about how we deal with difficulties. One of the interesting things that studies have found is that when children in the United States have problems in school, American parents are fairly likely to say, well, the subject must be too hard for the child. On the other hand, Korean parents and other parents of Asian origin are more likely to say he or she isn't trying hard enough. Now think about this. If it's too hard for you, there's not much you can do about it. But if you aren't trying hard enough, that can be corrected. And so one of the beliefs that we have about performance of children in school is that, or one of the things that we think is going on, is that the attributions we make for the causes of failure become self-fulfilling prophecies. And so American parents who think that the work is too hard for their children don't give them any reason to work any harder. And I had a roommate in college who was a double E student and had a fairly low IQ by engineering standards. And what I found was that he had to work harder than the rest of us, but I guess his revenge was that he graduated with a 3.84 average, and the only reason he didn't have a 4.0 was because of physical education courses, which he didn't have as much control over as he did his intelligence kinds of courses. Now, ask yourself, which of these things or which of these reasons do you give for difficulty when you run into problems? Is it because it's too difficult for you? Is it because you didn't try hard enough? Is it because you feel like you had bad luck? Now, you know, everybody has bad luck once in a while, but if that becomes a consistent reason for failure, then I would urge you to, as we said the other day, go look in the mirror. And if you don't like what you see in the mirror, don't blame the mirror. Ask yourself what you're doing that's keeping you from being successful. So how we handle difficulty is really, really important. And I just heard a story this week about the difference in parenting styles between our older generation parents. And the story goes like this. When parents tell their children that everything they ever did worked beautifully, and those children get grown and they hit difficulties, they think, my goodness, mom and dad didn't have any problems. There must be something wrong with me. On the other hand, if you have children and you tell them, you know, there were times when I had a rough time. I had to really work hard at this, and gee, I had trouble with math in school, or I had trouble with history or English or whatever it may be, and I've never been a great speller, but, you know, I've worked really hard and I've overcome a lot of those difficulties, and you can do that too. You actually inoculate your children against the surprise when they against being surprised when they run into difficulties later on. This is also one of the problems that we're having when the school system gives everybody pats on the back for everything, and then they get into the workplace and they find that their work isn't all A+ work, and they get criticized for something they do, and it just is a terrible blow to their egos and a real shock to them. And so they haven't really been prepared for difficulty under those kinds of conditions. And so we need to be resilient enough to bounce back when these kinds of things happen. So how do you know if there's an incongruity between what you say you'd like to do and what you are actually going to do? Well, if you say that you can do something or that you're going to do something, pay attention to how you feel when you say it, because if you feel a little nudge that says you can't do it or you feel doubt about it, that says that there's some incongruity in there. There might be something that's going to hold you back. Here's another one. If you say consistently, well, I'll try to do that, that suggests that you're hedging. You'll notice that people that are really high achievers tend to say, instead of I'll try to do it, they just say, I'll do it. It might take a little time, but I'll do it. There used to be a sign that I saw somewhere I worked that said, the difficult we do immediately, the impossible takes a little longer. And that's that positive can-do attitude that you really need if you're going to be able to persist in the face of difficulty. The next one is to remember a time when you were successful. So next we want to move into how to deal with these incongruities, and we do that by remembering a time that we were successful at something, and we get a clear image in our head, and we try to imagine doing something next that we were a bit afraid of or uncertain, and ask ourselves how it looks. Does it look as brilliant and clear as the thing that we just said we were successful at? If it is, there's a high probability that you'll be able to do it. On the other hand, if it's less vivid, if it's in grayscale, if it's smaller or more distant, this may be a good signal that there's doubt in your mind about whether or not you can achieve something. And so one of the techniques to do is to try very hard to make that image similar to the success image. So let me say that again. Look at a time when you were successful at something. Try to get a clear image of it in your head. And then imagine doing something that you're afraid to do, something you haven't done yet, and ask yourself if they're the same kind of brightness and so on, and if they're not, see if you can make them to be very similar. If you can, you're probably good to go. If you can't, then you may find that you're not going to make it. Now, there's one other way to test this thing, but you need a partner to do this. And I didn't make a slide on this, but I'll just tell you about it. It's called muscle testing. And essentially what it consists of is to have a partner ask you a question which can be answered yes or no. And so if they say, can you see yourself doing that? And the answer is yes, you get one response, and if the answer is no, you get a different response. Now, here's the way you do the response. If you hold your arm out horizontally, and some of you have probably seen this done, you hold your arm out horizontally and have the other person just push down on it after they ask you the question. If the answer is, yes, I can see myself doing this thing, your muscles should be strong, and they should have to use a fair amount of force to push your arm down. On the other hand, if your bodily response is a negative, a no, it will be very easy to push your arm down. Now, this may sound kind of hokey to you, but this is a technique that has been tested and proven over and over and over again, and it works very nicely. And so if you're unable to really test for congruence by yourself, then get a friend to ask you these questions and see what happens in terms of your yes and no responses. It must be yes/no responses. It can't be anything that would require any kind of dialogue. So these are just a couple of things that you can do to look for incongruity. By the way, these are great things to use if you're dealing with your children or your teammates in a project, for example, and you're trying to set goals and you're trying to get commitments from them, and you're saying, okay, you okay with that commitment? Are you okay with this target? And they say yes with their mouth, but you see a no with their face, with a slight shaking of their head, or they say it with weak energy. You know, it's kind of half-hearted. Anytime that nonverbal response contradicts the verbal, you should go with the nonverbal. And so I would say to the person, well, what do we have to do? You know, I sense some hesitation on your part, or I sense some doubt on your part. What do we need to do to satisfy your doubt or take care of your concerns so that you can be more enthusiastic about this, because we need to make a firm commitment. So beauty of some of these techniques is that they have more use than just checking personal stuff for yourself. You can also use this for your teammates, family, and so on. Now, let me just point out before I start talking about this slide that tonight we have 11 people online. Like I said, I thought a while ago I was going to be talking to myself, because the numbers start to dwindle. Now, some of that is simply the reality of our world, that there are a lot of you that are busy and things come up and you can't make Thursday evening things, and you have an out, which is that the sessions are recorded. And so, you know, if you miss a session, you can always look at it tomorrow. And by the way, I do post these within 48 hours after the session, so they are on the website. But in any case, one of the problems we all have is it can be very difficult to stay motivated, even to come to the sessions over a 12-week period, much less to put these things into practice, because your homework assignment last week was to practice the circle of excellence and that sort of thing. And a lot of times you do pretty well for the first day or two, and then you get on to other things, and pretty soon you've lost your momentum. And notice that motivate and momentum have some common sounds in there and some common elements in them. And so what do we do about that? Well, chunking down things helps an awful lot, because as we said several sessions back, the way you eat an elephant is one bite at a time. If you try to eat the elephant all in one bite, then you're likely to be overwhelmed and you're likely to give up. And so if you were thinking, okay, I'll be successful by starting a brand new business and I'm going to need to invest about $1 million in it, and you're only making $25,000 a year, that might be way too big a jump for you. But if you say, well, I'll start small and I'll open a little business and I won't hire anybody that's going to be overhead and all that, I'll just work by myself, then you're starting out at a more reasonable pace. And so we have to make sure that we don't set ourselves up to fail just because we go too far too fast. Now, in terms of motivation, it turns out that there are really two ways that people motivate themselves. One of those ways is what I call avoidance motivation, or it's also sometimes called away from motivation. That is, we're trying to move away from something unpleasant. So, for example, if you find it difficult to get out of bed in the morning and your alarm clock goes off, and thank goodness we got a little snooze button on there, and you poke the button and 5 minutes later the alarm goes off again, and you do that about 5 times until you finally realize, oh my God, I've slept for another half an hour or 45 minutes, and now I'm down to the wire. I got to get my butt out of bed or I'm going to be late for work, and if I'm late for work, I'm going to get yelled at. So that's the kind of away from motivation that some of us use. And the interesting thing about that is that if that's your primary style of being motivated, your life tends to be fairly stressful, because you tend to avoid doing things until pressure builds up to the point where you absolutely have to do it. You're getting yelled at, you're getting in trouble, you've missed a payment, the creditors are calling you because you're late with your payment, you're paying interest fees or penalty fees, etc. So If your life is like that, your away from motivation is probably your primary motivator, and it can be useful, but it also can create those problems. Now, the other kind of motivation is what we call toward motivation. We move toward something that we want. Or another way to think about it is this is what most achievement motivation is about. People are trying to move toward a goal, and that's another word for it. It's goal motivated, whereas the other one is moving away from something bad. Now, it turns out, according to the NLP people, and they've put thousands of people through these tests, that more of us are avoidance motivated than are toward motivators. And I found this little cartoon today, which I thought just really illustrates the avoidance type of motivation, because these two people obviously are avoiding communicating, and so they're trying to do it through the dog. And at least the guy is. The wife says she hates it when he uses the dog to communicate, so she must be a little more willing to do it face to face, but he doesn't want to do it that way. And so think about all the situations in which people try to motivate you using the away from motivation. For example, in advertising, you hear them say, don't miss this opportunity. Don't be the last to get on the bandwagon. Get rid of those unsightly pounds. Do you have bad breath that's causing you to lose friendships? Do you have cellulite? We can help you lose it. All of these are motivations to get away from something. Don't miss out. Don't miss out. Don't be the last. Don't spend too much money. All the prohibitive kinds of things, those are trying to keep you from experiencing pain of some kind. And the positive motivation is the one where everybody's saying, I got to go get that, do that, etc. Now, it turns out that high achievers tend to use a combination of the two, and the trick is that the order in which you use them is very important. So you should begin with stating the avoidance motivator, followed by the goal motivator. And so, for example, if you were interested in stopping smoking, I've told you in previous sessions, getting rid of something is not a powerful motivator, but in this case, if you combine it with a positive, it can work better. And so you say, I don't want to smoke anymore, so I'm going to slowly taper down. So I'm going to move toward a zero smoking way of living, if you want to think of it that way. And then the next one, I don't want to be poor anymore, so I'm going to start my own business. So you state the away from followed by the positive. The next one, I don't like being fat, so I'm going to start exercising and eating right so that I can be trim and fit. Now, why is this important? Well, in psychology, there's what's called a primacy-recency effect in communication. And it turns out that in short directives like this, or short statements of purpose, the last item stated tends to carry more weight than the first one, okay? And so if you turn these around and you say, well, I'm going to start my own business so I won't be poor anymore, the mind tends to focus more on being poor than it does starting the business. And we've said previously that's one reason for stating goals as positives, because the mind doesn't process negatives very well. And so we have found that the best way to go about this whole thing is to state those directives to ourselves or directives to your people in your team. For example, if you're a team leader or a supervisor, to state the negative one first, followed by the positive one. And that way, even if the person is primarily away from motivated, they are still getting a positive, because we all respond to both to some degree. And it's just a matter of which one is the most dominant one. Okay, so we've got a couple things here that can help us with avoidance motivation, and we're going to combine that now with our imaging technique. So if you tend to be the kind of person that uses avoidance motivation, one of the ways to keep yourself from sitting down and letting the pressure build and build and build is to just simply sit down and say, okay, I know this needs to be done, and what's going to happen if I don't go ahead and do it? And you imagine what's going to happen, all the bad stuff that's going to happen, and you make those images bigger and brighter and more potent, and you try to get the feeling of revulsion or fear or whatever it is that you would experience if the thing got worse. And in doing so, what you do is, in a very short time, you get yourself motivated to go ahead and do it instead of dragging it out, procrastinating, and building up the pressure and creating lots of stress for yourself, which, as I've told you in previous sessions, stress will eventually kill you because you're creating toxic chemicals in your brain that go through your bloodstream and cause harm to your body. Now, by the same token, if you're the kind of person that thinks about goal-oriented motivation, then you ought to sit down and think about all the positive outcomes that will accrue when you have done the thing. And this is the one that most of us advocate for achievement motivation, where you visualize the objective as already being accomplished, and you try to get the feeling of what it'll be like when it is accomplished, and feel the joy and excitement, and imagine your friends coming up and telling you that was great and congratulations, and they're really happy for you and so on. So for those of you that are primarily goal-oriented, this is a way to just bolster the thing. And again, now you can combine these, because if there are problems with not doing something that you think should be done, there definitely is something there to avoid. And so you can use the negative strategy first and imagine all the things that are going to be bad for you, and then think about the good effects of going ahead and doing it, and you can get yourself motivated pretty well to do it. Now, how do you apply that to this particular program that we're in? Well, if you keep saying to yourself, well, okay, I'm really busy right now, and Jim keeps introducing these things, and they take time, and he gives me homework assignments every week, and golly, I don't have time to do all that stuff. But, you know, he's putting all these recordings on the website, and whenever we get through this program and I've got more time, I'll go back and I'll sit down and I'll watch all those assignments, and I'll do all that stuff in them, and you know, I'll get around to it. Well, you know, and I know that the probability of that ever happening is just about zero, if not even less than zero. And so you owe it to yourself to find a way, if this is really important to you, and for those of you that are on here with me tonight, I'm sure you do find it important or you wouldn't be here, then you owe it to yourself to try to find ways to motivate yourself to do the assignments as we go. You know that you'll never find the time. You're going to have to make the time. And we're really not talking about a very large investment of time on a daily basis. If you spend 15 minutes a day on this stuff, it will pay dividends. And you can make 15 minutes by doing something, giving up a coffee break, or if necessary, go have a coffee break and do it, because that can work as well. So those are the techniques for tonight. And in the next 5 sessions that we have left, I'm going to return to the principles of success, and we're going to feed you some more things that you can work on. I'm keeping this session short tonight because these things that I've presented you with are going to require a fair amount of work on your part, and there's no point in my loading you up with a whole bunch of stuff until you have had time to absorb these and master them. So here's going to be your assignment for the following week. I want you to think of a time when you failed to achieve a goal, and ask yourself, what reason did you give for it? And then ask yourself, does the because, you know, I failed to achieve that goal because, does what follows tell you anything about your beliefs? Now, it may not. it may be that you had bad luck. And if that's simply the case, pick something else and look at several failures. And if there's no pattern in them, then, and they're just random, then it's probably not a limiting belief that you're dealing with. But I'm very suspicious of that ever happening very much, because most people do have some kind of things that if they fail fairly often, there's something keeping them from it. Or if they fail at certain things, you know, we don't fail at everything. We fail at certain limited things, and so you might use it for that. Okay, then work on remembering successes and note how the images look compared to the failures, and make your imagined goals conform to your success images. And keep working on this until you can make those congruent. And if you cannot make them congruent, that suggests to me that you have some kind of resistance, something going on in your life that if you achieve success, it might be a problem for you. If any of you run into that sort of thing, please feel free to drop me an email and tell me a little bit about it, and I can then hopefully suggest some things for you to do that are different and maybe a little bit outside the evening program. Check the congruity part. Ask yourself if any part of you objects to your pursuing the goal, or if any part of you objects to the images that you're presenting your subconscious. If you feel hesitation or resistance of any kind, there may be a belief that's going to prevent your success. And if you can uncover that belief, then you can try the techniques we've given you for removing it. Then replace it with images of success and keep testing until you don't feel any resistance. So that's going to require some time, and what I would suggest you do, since I'm going to knock off about 15 minutes early tonight, is spend the next 15 minutes practicing this stuff. This will be a great use of your time. So I will take a chance to see if anybody has any questions before we close, and if not, then we'll wind it down and shut the program off. But if you do have a question, just type a question in the question box and I'll try to answer it for you. My email address, by the way, is lewisinstituteinc@yahoo.com. That's Lewis Institute, just run it all together. Put the 3 letters Inc. after it, lewisinstituteinc@yahoo.com. And I'll be glad to try to answer questions by email if you don't want to ask them online tonight. Also, I would really appreciate if you would send me some comments about how this stuff's working for you, so that I have a better feeling for that. Okay, somebody wants to know about the pod concept. Okay, the pod concept is that you form a group of 3, 4 people. It can be larger, but it's a good idea to keep it small. And you meet weekly, bi-weekly. Some people only meet monthly, but you meet periodically online or by telephone to talk about how things are working for you, what you're doing, what you've tried, what you've had difficulty with. It's kind of a support group, and one of the things that we know is when you start running into trouble applying things, a support group is an invaluable thing. It's really, really useful. And so if you get on the How Can I Be Successful website that we've set up, you can post your name and your email address and ask for other people to join you in a pod. And you can do those with Skype even if you're on an international basis, and not be paying huge phone bills. And of course you can do them in the US very easily, either toll free or whatever. But that's the system, and they can be quite helpful if you do them right. Thanks for that question, and I'm not seeing any more questions come in, and people are signing off, so I'm going to pull the plug and wish you a good weekend, and hope that your week goes well. And please do try to do the assignments, and let me know how they work for you. Good night.